Now let's go on to Divine Comedy by Dante. And again, Dante is trying to answer the question, why did Jesus have to kill himself? What's the logic of that? That makes no sense, okay? And traditionally, what the Catholic Church teaches people is, it's because when we do evil, we become slaves of Satan. So Jesus made a deal with Satan. Basically, Jesus says, I will die, and then you can take my body, okay? And then you will have to free my people. And Satan's like, that's a really good deal, man. God in exchange for these slaves? Sure, I'll make that deal. But the thing is that Jesus, when he died and he freed us, he cannot ever truly die. Okay? Does that make sense? So this is called a ransom theory. And this is how, during Dante's time, most people understood why Jesus had to die. Jesus died so that we would stop being slaves of Satan, and now we are slaves to Jesus. And that's why we must worship Jesus. And Dante's like, no, that can't possibly be right, okay? God will not come to free us so that we become slaves to God. God came to free us so that we could be free, okay? All right, so this is Dante. And what's going to happen here is, in heaven, there's going to be a conversation between Dante and Beatrice, who he loves, okay? And they're going to discuss the nature of the universe. And this is Beatrice talking to Dante.
The greatest gift, the magnanimity of God, as he created, gave the gift most suited to his goodness. Gift that he most prizes was the freedom of the will.
Okay, so the underlying principle of the universe is freedom of will. If God is love, okay, and he loves people, then he must trust people. Therefore, freedom of will is the most important principle, okay? Same thing if you're a parent. If you truly love your child, you will let your child go and make his own mistakes. You will not protect your child, okay? Even if it means that your child goes to the park and might get kidnapped or whatever, okay? You have to let him go. You have to let him or her go, because true love means trusting other people, okay? Keep on going.
You say, what I have heard is clear to me, but this is hidden from me. Why God willed precisely this pathway for redemption?
Okay, so again, the Catholic Church teaches you that Jesus redeemed us from our sins, okay? But then the question is, why did Jesus have to kill himself again? That makes no sense. Keep on going.
Brother, this ordinance is buried from the eyes of everyone whose intellect has not matured within the flame of love.
So Beatrice is saying to Dante, yes, I know this makes no sense because you're thinking with your mind. But the mind is not where the spark is, okay? The divine spark is in the heart. So stop thinking with your mind and feel with your heart. And let the spark, the divine spark, glow in you, and then you will see the truth for yourself. Sorry. Okay, keep on going.
The godly godness that has banished every envy from its own self, burn in itself, and sparkling so, it shows internal beauties. All that derives directly from this godness is everlasting, since the seal of godness impressed an imprint that never alters.
Okay, so God is perfect. He's forever good. He's forever love. He's forever compassion, forever forgiveness, okay? And there's a spark of God in us, right? The divine spark, which is our hearts. So there's always this perfection in us, okay? Keep on going.
Only man's sin annuls man's liberty, makes him unlike the highest good, so that in him the brightness of its light is dim.
Okay, this is important, okay? Even though the spark is forever in us, we can cover it up with mud. We can cover it up with dirt. We can forget about it, okay? How? By doing evil. By disobeying. All right? If we do more and more evil, we forget the spark more and more, and it dims in us. So the spark can glow or it can dim, depending on our actions. But the spark will always be there.
So if, like you said, that parents, the true love is to trust, right? So if parents trust their kid, they will let their kids to make mistakes. But what if kids are, for example, being kidnapped and they're being killed? Is that still count as the love of trust?
Okay, obviously, if your child is in danger, you go save your child, okay? but you cannot let your fear and anxiety of your child being kidnapped destroy the child's freedom. Does that make sense? You cannot impose your fear on your child.
Like you need to let your child to feel the anxieties.
No. You have to let your child do what your child wants to do. If your child wants to go play in the playground, you let the child go play in the playground, okay? And if you feel like there's a danger, then you go and make sure that your child is safe. You understand?
But still letting him to do what they want.
Yeah, okay. Look, when you're actually a parent, you know what is safe and what is not safe, okay? Sending your child to the playground where there are other children, there are adults around, is safe. Do you understand? Sending your child outside at midnight to wander the streets is not safe. Do you understand? Okay? You know. You don't have to think about this. All right? All right. Okay, keep on reading.
And man cannot regain his dignity unless, within left emptiness, man fills a void with just immense for evil pleasure.
Okay, so the problem is this. We do all this evil, and now we can't forgive ourselves, so we're stuck where we are. Okay? We cannot compensate for the evil that we do, so what we do is do more evil to ignore the fact that we cannot forgive ourselves. Does that make sense? So evil creates more evil. Evil compounds on evil. So now we're just stuck, okay? So by disobeying God, by eating that fruit, by trying to be like God, we created evil. And this evil forces us to be more evil. Now we're just stuck, okay?
For when your nature sinks so totally within its seed, then from these dignities, just as from paradise, that nature parted.
Okay, so we left the Garden of Eden not because we broke the law. We left the Garden of Eden because we cannot forgive ourselves from the evil that we've committed. And so we keep on doing more and more evil, okay? So the Garden of Eden is metaphorical. Keep on going.
And they can never be regained if you consider carefully by any way that did not pass across one of these fours. Either through nothing other than his mercy, God has to pardon man, or of himself man has to prefer payment for his folly.
Okay, so now that we've broken the law, now that we've disobeyed God, now that there's evil in our hearts, what can we do? Okay, and what Beatrice says is there's two possibilities. The first possibility is that we compensate for the first evil, for the first act of disobedience. And what Beatrice says is, you can't do that because you try to be God. You try to kill God. So you cannot ever compensate God for the evil that you've done, okay? And then she says, well, the other possibility is that God forgives you. The problem, though, is that if God just forgives you, you won't learn anything, okay? Keep on going.
Man in his limits could not recompense, for no obedience, no humility he offered later could have been so deep that it could match the heights he made to reach. Through disobedience, man lacked the power to offer satisfaction by himself.
Very good. Okay, so do you understand this idea? Okay, you try to be God, so you can't ever ask for forgiveness for that. Keep on going.
For God showed greater generosity in giving his own self that man might be able to rise, than if he simply pardoned. For every other means fell short of justice, except the way whereby the Son of God humbled himself, where he became incarnate.
Okay, incarnate just means human, okay? So this is why Jesus had to kill himself. All right, so the problem is that God has to forgive us. But he has to forgive us in a way that allows us to learn from our mistakes and be better people, okay? And so let's use an analogy. The analogy is this. I'm a father, and I have a daughter named Eve, and I have a dog. And I say to Eve, I love you, Eve, so much. And then Eve says to me, do you love me or do you love the dog more? And I said, I love you both equally. Love is infinite. Of course I love you, but I also love the dog. And Eve goes away and says to herself, yeah, but how do I know he truly loves me? So what Eve does is, she kills the dog, okay? And then Eve says to me, hey, do you love me or do you love the dog more? And now I'm kind of stuck, the father, right? Because if I punish her, that shows her I love the dog more, right? But if I don't punish her, she's gonna do this again, okay? She's gonna kill another animal. So I'm stuck. So what do? So what God decides to do is this. The only way out of this conundrum, the only way out of this paradox is if I punish myself, okay? Because I should have said to her, I love you as much as the dog, all right? So what I do is I take a whip and I hit myself. And Eve watches this. And now Eve knows, first of all, I do love her because I'm punishing myself for her sake. And second of all, she won't do it again because she doesn't want to see me punished. And that's why Jesus had to kill himself. Do you understand? That's the logic here. Now it makes sense, right? God had to punish himself so that we would be humbled by a sacrifice. We would feel so much remorse and regret for making God die that we would never ever disobey him again. We would never ever try to become God ourselves. And that's why this had to happen. Okay? And because of this, Jesus freed us from the evil in us and led us to the path of good. Because now, all we have to do is remember Jesus, remember what he said, remember what he taught, and we'll forever be on the path towards the light. Yes?
Do we, like, for example, if I had done extreme mistakes previously, can I completely make it up or just forgive myself? Because I think I can't.
Okay, that's a great point, okay? So yeah, so the problem is this. The problem is that there are people who do real evil in this world, okay? It's possible, like a man kills your daughter, and then he's put in prison for the longest time. And he does all this evil, and so can he be forgiven? And the answer is yes. Because the only way for this world to work is if people are allowed to be forgiven. If people are not allowed to be forgiven, this entire world, this entire universe breaks down. That's why God is a God of forgiveness. Okay? Because if you think about it, if you think, okay, if we don't have forgiveness, what world do we live in? We live in a world of vengeance, right? If you kill my daughter, then I have to go kill your daughter. And then you're going to have to go kill my family, and then I have to go kill your family, okay? So the only way for this world to work, the only way for justice to prevail is if we're allowed to forgive each other. And previously, we don't have a tool to forgive each other because we ourselves don't have the wisdom. And now with the arrival of Jesus, we remember that if Jesus forgives us, Jesus will forgive me always. And so if I turn towards Jesus, then I will be forgiven.
But like currently, I think I still could not forgive myself for making that mistake. Like I think whatever things that I do to make up the mistake, I think I could not forgive me at that time making that mistake.
Right, but at the same time, you went to prison, right? You've been punished already. So justice has been served, so you can now forgive yourself. Okay? Just because you believe in Jesus doesn't mean you won't go to prison for killing someone. You're still going to go to prison, but now you can forgive yourself because you've done your time, and also because you remember that Jesus forgives you, okay? But the only way for you to move on in your life, the only way for society to move on is if you're able to forgive yourself. Okay, does that make sense? If in a world there's no forgiveness, this world would break down really quickly because everyone would just kill each other. Okay? So, and again, what's happening is this, and this is what Dante teaches us. You're thinking with your head, okay? Because you're still young. When you grow older, and your heart matures, and you have more life experience, then you'll be able to feel with your heart. Once you feel with your heart, all this will make sense to you, okay? But I completely understand where you're coming from, because at your age, if someone told me this, I'd be like, you're crazy. This makes no sense. Because if you do evil, then your entire life should be one of evil. If you do evil, evil should come to you, okay? But what Jesus is saying is like, no, in that world, no one can be happy, okay? Because the people whose evil has been done to them are so focused on vengeance, on hatred, on anger, that you can never ever be a happy person, okay? You leave the monad, you leave the divine, okay? So when you hate someone, you're actually hating yourself as opposed to that person. Okay? All right. So now that we understand the this idea, now what Dante's going to explain is, why are we here? Okay? What's the purpose of the universe? Okay? Can you read, Alan?
You say, I see that water, see that fire and air and earth, and all that they compose come to the corruption, and endure so briefly. And yet these two were things created. If what has been said above is true, then these things never should be subject to corruption.
Okay, so the idea is like God is perfect, everything he creates is perfect. So if that's the case, then why do we die? And so what Preacher says is this. God is perfect, he creates perfection, but he creates the laws of the universe. He creates the game, okay? That's perfect. The things within the game enter a cycle of destruction and life and death, okay? Because that's the only way for the game, for the universe to work properly. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay, keep on reading.
Brother, the angels and the pure country where you are now, these may be said to be created, and they are in all their being. Whereas the elements you have mentioned, as well as those things that are made from them, receive their form from a created power. The matter they contain has been created, just as within the stars that well about them. The power to give form had been created. The rays and motion of the holy lights draw forth the soul of every animal and plant from matter able to take form.
Okay, so do you understand? The world, the laws of the universe are created, okay?
But your life is breathed forth immediately by the chief God, good, who so enamors it of his own self that it desires him always. So reasoning, you also can deduce your resurrection. You need but remember the way in which your human flesh was fashioned, when both of the first parents were created.
Okay, so the world that we live in is a world in which we can make mistakes, in which we can learn, we can grow, okay? And we don't have to worry about making mistakes, because when we die, all that will happen is we'll just return to the good, and we will be reincarnated, okay? We'll come back. Jesus was resurrected, but we will be resurrected as well. And we have infinite opportunity to grow as souls. And that's the purpose of life, to learn, to make mistakes, to be creative, to imagine new possibilities. That's why we were created, okay? And to ensure that we can continue to grow, there's death, okay? Death allows for a reset. Death allows us to rejuvenate ourselves and learn from mistakes. So don't think about this lifetime, think about all possible lifetimes and live your life accordingly to that, okay? Make the most of your life here by making as many mistakes as possible, because only by making mistakes can you actually grow as a soul, okay?